Okay, I'm just going to quickly go over the setting up of the flight controller. First thing you've got to do is flash the flight controller with the latest version of INAV in this case. Look up the target for the board, in this case BDB F405 wing is the target. Choose the latest version, and then you need to boot it in DFU mode, and that can be done by holding down the OK button. Then you load it online and flash the firmware. Now this one's already been done, so the next thing to do when you get it is to calibrate it, and that's easiest done before you actually connect it to the plane or anything else. Just in the basic unit, it can be powered from the USB. So you go into the first section, calibration, reset calibration, and you just go through all the steps. And the important thing is at the bottom, these numbers go from 0 to some numbers. It's just the fractional settings for the calibration. Once you've got numbers in the bottom there, you're okay to go on to the next stage. It's now picking up the movements correctly. This is the one that's in the plane, so as I moved the plane, it matched the pictures. And we're going to set the ports. It's useful to know what the ports are, and the documentation that comes with this BDB is pretty good. It's long, and you really want to look at different sections. There's a picture here in the documentation that shows you the general configuration using the plug and play. But the better thing to use for all the ports is the actual top plate on it. You can see that each of the connectors actually marks what the UR is for that connector. And at the bottom you've got the servo links, 1, 2 for the motors and 3 to 11 for others. So if we go into ports, and if we look at first the top one, USB VCP, that's for your USB connection. Serial 1, and that's set to serial RX by default. And if you look on the middle section, you've got TX1, RX1, 4.5 volts and ground. The GPS will be RX3 and TX3. We're not using the compass, so SLC and SDA are not there, so we just set UART3 to GPS. We want to set the UART5, which is on the top left here on that diagram, to DJI, the relevant DJI. This one incorrect. That's more for the old DJI system. I'll correct that later. I actually set that wrong. But basically you set under the peripherals the type of video you are. Here's the mixer. It's set as flying wing at the moment. But what you want to do is set that flying wing, load and apply. This is what you do first. And it will say, if there's already one there, you'll get this warning. Otherwise, it will say, are you sure? And you save and reboot. That way you'll get a machine, you'll get the servos set correctly. And then if we go down to the mixer, we can see that motor 1 is set automatically because it defaults to 1 motor. And further down, on the model of the wing, you'll see S3, S4. So we've got servo 1 and 2, and if you look in the S3 and S4, that's servo 1 and 2. And servo 1 is like the left wing. Yeah, I'm just checking across. So S3, S4, servo 1, servo 2. And servo 1 is stabilised roll, stabilised pitch. And the same for the other one, but you'll notice the roll is reversed on the right wing. Now we may have to set this differently, but because the servos are under the wing and not over the wing. But that's the default, so the pitch goes up and down for both of them, and the roll goes opposite in the mixer. If we look at the outputs, we're going to enable the servo and motor output at the top. And then our ESC that I put in is an optical one. It uses It uses a different link. You can use standard against it, but you're better off with D-Shot. That's a digital link. So we set that to D-Shot. You can see as I move the plane, the servos are now responding to try and correct. That's effectively the stabilized mode. It's not turning to 0, and you can see the servos are set to 1500 midpoint, 1000 and 2000 for minimum and maximum. That's as we want, so we need to move on to the next section. Yeah, you can reverse mode servos if needed there, if they're going the wrong way. We're going to the configuration now. If you look at the top, we've only got a barrow running, so we need to tell it we've got GPS. So it's already spotted the accelerometer, the barometer, and the I2C speed. That's fine, just leave them as it's set. They're set into the build when you pick the flight controller. So we're going to turn on GPS for navigation telemetry. If we look further down, we've got enable server motor and server output. That's good. We've got OSD, and we've also got permanently enable air mode. That's recommended. So when you've not picked any mode, it will go into air mode, which is basically acro mode on a quad. And at the bottom here we've got continuously trimmed servos on fixed wing, which we also select. If you look in the documentation, you can find out the settings for the voltage scale and the current meter scale. It's listed there. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to find it, so I've shown it there. 110, 1100 for voltage, and 195 for current. So we put them in there. It may not be dead on, spot on accurate, but it will certainly get you into a very close ballpark. And on to the next section, I think. We're going to go down to fail safe. Now we've got GPS working at the top. We don't want to just land if we lose signal. We want it to return home. So there we go, set return to home. The next section will be, we're going to skip past PID tuning and go straight to advanced tuning. PID tuning's for later after you got it flying. So on the left hand side, this section has expanded rather from the older versions of INAV. We've got auto launch settings, we've got landing settings, which we won't be looking at, but let's look at the auto launch. Auto launch is great to use. The first thing to do is look at the idle throttle. Now, as an idle throttle 1000, it means it's not going anywhere. So we want to set that to a low setting. So 1200 or 1300, that sort of area just gives a low turnover of the prop. The delay, idle throttle delay, I like it to be just a few milliseconds. That is 10,000, which gives me 10 seconds. So basically at 10 seconds after I set enable, it will go into the idle throttle. Gives me time to pick it up. Maximum throw angle, I just set at 180. If I throw it badly, I want it to try and fix it, not just to give up if I throw it too high. Motor delay, 100 milliseconds, I think 1/10 of a second is a little bit too short. It's more likely to catch your hand with the prop. So 200 milliseconds gives you a bit more time to get away from your hand before the flight controller powers up the motor to take off launch throttle. The motor spin up time, 100 milliseconds is fine for most motors. If you're turning very big props, you want to increase that to reduce the stress on the motor. Launch throttle, 1700 is fine for light plane, but this one's a bit different. It's a heavyish plane, but it's also got a fairly small high-pitched throttle prop, so I want it to have a bit more guts. So 1800, maybe even 1850. 25 degrees climb angle is okay. Originally INAV chose 18, which seems a bit shallow, but that's your own choice. I usually leave it there. Launch timeout is how long it will go in that launch mode, 5 seconds. That's normally enough to get a good climb. Maximum altitude of 50 meters. I want it just to go up as high as it can in that time. So I set that to something like 80 or even 120 meters. I just want it to go for it. So this is set to 80 meters here. And the end transition time is how slowly it closes the throttle ready to fly in normal mode. 3 seconds I think is a bit too long. I prefer 2 seconds. These are very much preferences, and these are based on my other Dolphins that I have. Go down, we won't worry about the landing settings. We're not doing landing at the moment. Generic settings, battery estimation, don't worry about that either. Return to home settings. Now, return to home attitude mode at least means it's just whatever you set, at least that height, which is fine. I want it to be at least whatever I say the return to home altitude is. It's set to 50 meters here. And the return to home altitude is how high you want it when it gets back to home. So I prefer it a little bit lower when it's actually back at home. So 35 meters I think is a perfectly good number there. Climb before return to home. I want it to climb. I don't want it to be stuck low, but I don't want it to climb straight ahead. So I usually say on forward spiral. So it will spiral up to that height. And then first stage climb first stage method at least. That's fine. Just leave it at that. I like the linear descent, which means when it's getting close to home, it will start coming down to that 35 meters that we set. But you can only use that if you have a distance that you start. So I use linear descent, yes, and I set my linear descent start distance at 0.5 kilometer. So when it gets within 0.5 kilometer of me, it will just generally slowly come down to the 35 meters and enter into a loiter. The new options here are return to home backtrack mode, which is really useful because if you return to home because of loss of signal, you might be flying down a valley or around something you don't want to come straight back into. So I tend to turn the return to home track method back on. I don't worry about the override return altitude and everything. That's more complex than it worry about. So return to home track back mode, I tend to turn on fail safe. Not if I initiate a return to home, just on fail safe. And I say for the last 0.5 kilometer, backtrack. Safe home mode, return to home, it's fine. Safe home is not something I'm going to cover here. It just allows you to set other landing points on a mission, for example. Land after return to home. By default it's set to fail safe only, so it will try and land, it will come down in a circle spiral down into the ground if it's on a fail safe. I normally put that to never, and I usually stick a small amount of fail safe mission delay in, so give it time to recover. If it immediately goes into fail safe mode, that would be fine for a quad, but for a plane you might want to just wait a second or so just in case signal comes back. So there I've set land after return to home to never, so it will just loiter, and it will stay in loiter until you either reconnect your transmitter or it runs out of battery power. Next bit to look at is, that's all saved. Next bit to look at, we're not doing programming, it's the receiver, and you can see the receiver's picking up quite nicely. And I can check my mode switches, which is like ARM, and turn on the video, which is channel 10. So I'm checking that everything's picking up correctly on roll, pitch and elevator. Roll, pitch and yaw. Not that we have a yaw. And let's go into modes. So we're going to add an arm range. I flick my arm switch and just set that to the arm. And then just quickly go through the other modes I want to set, which is flight modes. I don't use angle as such, but I do use horizon, which is angle and acro mixed together. So what I have with channel 6 is it goes to 6 settings. It's the row buttons on the top. So row 1 is acro, which is nothing. So if you set to nothing, it goes to acro, remember, at the bottom. It's the default we set. In configuration, so horizon is second mode. Then the third mode I have is manual, again on channel 6. There we go, manual. And then the other modes I use, I have my fourth one as auto level, my fifth one as auto tune, and my sixth one on that 6-way switch I set to buzzer, so I can turn on the buzzer. So let's set on. Oh, I'm just checking the channel for one of the modes. So that's cruise, that's on channel 7. I have cruise and I have loiter on channel 7. So the upper level is loiter. Again, these are obviously your own preferences. These are the ones I use generally. Then back to channel 6, I think. And we'll be going to return home. That's on, I can't remember, channel 8. There we are. So I have my return to home button. I have waypoint in the mid range, and then return to home on the high. So return to home there, and the waypoint on channel 9 in the middle. So putting up that switch goes to waypoint first, and if I push it all the way up, it returns to home. Let's go down and do auto tune. Which is just looking at what channel, channel 5, auto tune. Oh, channel 6, sorry. So we'll set that, and auto level. Auto level is the first setting on channel 6. And then higher up, next one up is auto tune. And then I have buzzer on the end, as I said. So we'll scroll down to buzzer on channel 6. Beeper. And we'll put that at the high level. So that's the 6-way set. I've done return to home, I've done cruise, I've done loiter. Those are the main settings I need to do. Don't think there's any others I use. Remember to save at the end. I'm just checking the switches, make certain it highlights, and see acro when I've got on nothing. Good. So save that. And we'll go back to, what's next? Yeah, that's the permanent enable air mode. That's why it goes to acro. Adjustments we're not going to bother about. Let's have a quick look at GPS. Now I've already said this, but for this M10 controller, it uses the protocol of U-Block 7. So GPS and navigation, U-Block 7. Ground assistance, you don't have to set these, but I like to, just because I'm in Europe, I like to set them so they set up quickly. So instead of auto detect, I set it to European, and then I add the Galileo satellites. Now you can't add that along with Baidu and Glasnost. It will only allow you to set one other effectively. You can use Baidu and Glasnost together, but you can't use Galileo and the regular U-Block 7 GPS. They're using different frequencies or something. Now I set the daylight savings, and you can see that the update time is approximately 10 Hertz and we're getting signals. Alignment tool, this is very useful if you're mounting your flight controller other than standard. So if the arrow is not pointing to the forward, you can use this to set the position of the flight controller relative to the plane, and also very useful if you're using a compass function. You need to set the angle of the compass to the plane. Mission control, well, we're not covering that at the moment. OSD, now as you can see, that's not right. That's showing video format auto. It should be showing HD0 or DJI FPV, and I'm looking at that thinking, well, that's wrong. So I go back to ports, and yeah, I spot my fault. DJI FPV VTX is for the original DJI transmitters, so we need to change that to MSP display port. We don't need the MSP turned on the left. Save and reboot that, and let's go back to OSD. And we got video format HD0, that's good. And if we put that down to Betaflight HD compatible, we'll get everything we can do with an O3. And then just fill this out according to your wants and needs. And this is basically how I have mine set up. I like the distance and arrow point to home fairly near the middle, GPS at the bottom. And then if you go into sensors, you can move the plane around and see how it's reacting. Make certain all the sensors are reacting to the movements of the plane. And black box. Now I haven't added an SD card to this one. I will be adding one for the initial flights at least. And that's it. That's the general configuration done. If we just look at the mixer, I'm now going to be adding on the switch for the VTX. As you can see, that's channel 10. Goes from low to high. That's where I've set it up. So if I go into, I believe, mixer, yep. We want to add a servo output. Add a new mixer rule. And this, I get this wrong a little bit, but we sort it out in the end. So add a new mixer rule. And then you have to pick the servo. Now, it's on, I think, number 9 or 8. But what number do we use? So I just add in a number, I think. Do a save and boot. Oh, and set the input to RC channel 10. That's the one we set earlier. So we're just saying whatever's on RC channel 10, put to that servo output. And I tested it and it didn't work. So as it turned out, I think I needed, it was S8 the switch was connected to, which is actually, if you look at that list, servo 6. So I switched it from 9 to 8. That didn't work. Or was it servo 7? Anyway, I just went through the servo outputs until it switched. I could see it switching the switch on and off. That wasn't working, so try it again. 7. Servo 7, which is S9. There we are. That's the one I wanted. Once that's done, I went to the outputs. Or is it 6? No, 7. Went to outputs. Come on, receiver. I can see I'm switching channel 10. And the switch is turning on and off. And if you look at the outputs, you can see that S7 is being turned on. Servo 7 is turning on and off, reflecting what I'm putting in. So that turns the video switch on and off.